In this video, we're going to be looking at teams again, and we're going to be looking at how teams collaborate with each other and how they can communicate with each other. We're going to go through a number of different models of collaboration that exist, and we're going to talk through a model of communication that will hopefully be able to let you see why things happen the way they do when you're working with other people using different technology mediums. So, once teams are formed, their success is really dependent on their ability to work together, to resolve any differences that they have, to be mindful of the different strengths and weaknesses that individual members of the team and the team as a whole have, and to really exploit these strengths and focus on the shared goals of the project in order to complete the work to as high a quality level as possible. There's a lot of different sorts of skills outside of the technical skills that we expect team members to have. These interpersonal skills can involve things like conflict resolution and servant leadership. And servant leadership is especially important for roles like Scrum Master inside of Scrum teams, where your job is more to support those around you as opposed to actually carrying out technical work yourself. The ability of team members to have these skills builds up trust within the team members for their peers, and it also helps to build up a commitment to the work and a commitment to having this shared goal and ultimately succeed in being able to carry out a project. Like we've said before, agile teams are really self-organizing. We're never going to tell you this is the way that we want you to do something. We might tell you this is what we want you to do, but the actual ability to do it is up to you. Okay. Agile teams aren't really directed and tracked and planned by a manager. We're never going to have something like a Gantt chart, which is going to have the exact things that you're working on. It's really up to you for how these things are working. But we are going to be really focusing on your competencies as a team and knowing how you can look at a requirement and then as a team understand what that requirement really means and the different things that you'll need to be able to do to resolve it in a coordinated manner. Okay, so for example, if we said we would like a website with a login system, you'd be able to think as a team to say, well, we need to think about the database that's going to hold the details, the server-side setup that's going to be needed for this, the front-end CSS framework that we're going to have in order to make this look pretty, the accessibility challenges that people might face. And all of these things as a whole help us to then figure out, well, how is this team going to self-organize itself to figure this out? Anytime that we're looking at a team, they are really going to be supported by a management type person, but think of this as more of a leader instead of a manager, a person that is able to lead the team and to help them along the way. Okay, this will be something like a Scrum Master inside of a Scrum session, a coach inside of a Kanban session, and they're really there to help to facilitate the work that's happening, to keep people on track and to really act as an advisor that people can go to if they're struggling with specific things. They might not be able to help with those things themselves, but they will be able to point you in the direction of other people, other resources that will be able to help you. And that's where self-organizing teams are really important. But as well as being self-organizing, we really want agile teams to be high-performing. We really want them to be able to build exceptional products, and to do this they need to have the skills and the abilities to do so. There's a number of different soft skills that we can put in place or that we can try and emphasize that can help people in doing this. So we can focus on having people have accountability and ownership of things that they're doing, but again, this accountability and ownership rests with the team and not with individuals. We can also try and generate positivity in team environments. Focus on the things that people are doing well. If someone has done something really well, tell them that this is really good. You do more of this thing. Teams also should really be able to adapt to change, and with Agile, that's one of the things that we really embrace with ideas like changing requirements and focusing on customer needs and the changing requirements, again, that come with this is something that we really want to emphasize. Team members really need to be able to kind of focus on their ability as individuals to go and carry out a task in a certain way as well. For example, if a team member thinks that they are able to carry out a task using a given framework that the team hasn't used before, they should feel empowered to be able to go and try that and not just told, no, this is not how we're going to be doing it. But they also need to bear in mind that the skills needed to use that framework are something that rests with them. And if it's something that the team as a whole is going to have to use, they're probably going to have to help train the team up with that as well. We also want to work at a consistent pace. And again, this is something that we really want to push within teams, agile teams especially, that even though this is a higher pressured environment, we don't want it to be a high stress environment. Okay, we want to make sure that you're still able to kind of turn off at the end of the day and say, okay, the work is done, I can now go and do something else. And this helps in actually taking pride in the achievements that you're doing and knowing that you're carrying out work that is valued, you're carrying out work that is worthwhile, and you're carrying out work that is of a very high quality. In order to help with this, teams normally try and use something that's called systems thinking. And this is really trying to kind of see the forest and the trees at the same time. So developers inside of teams can be very, very focused on making sure that they carry out this individual coding task to the best of their ability. But they also need to be able to see the wider picture. They need to be able to see how this thing that they're doing fits in with their work in general and how it fits in with the overall aims and values and goals of the project, but also the company that they're working in. Who is going to be benefiting from this work that you're doing? How are they going to be benefiting, and what role do you play in giving that benefit to these people? Inside of teams, it's also important to have ground rules. These can either be written or unwritten rules for how people behave and how they actually communicate with others. Some simple ground rules that you might put in place for teams are things like having your daily stand-ups for scrums every single day at 9 o'clock. Build errors. If they are present, they should be resolved within 2 hours so that you're not having code that is wrong inside of your code base. And all access to systems should be undergoing a user entitlement review. So if you do have sensitive data, making sure that only the people that are meant to have access to that have access to that. So think about all of these different rules that you might want to put in place within teams in order to help. It's also worth thinking about meeting etiquette and how people are actually going to be behaving in these meetings that you have. You might want to consider the role of agendas. Are you willing to have meetings that don't have agendas? I would recommend always having meetings with a clear agenda so that you can make sure that you know exactly what it is that's going to be covered and that you know what decisions are going to have to be made in this meeting. Okay? This also helps in people actually preparing for meetings themselves. One of the things I always push with my honours students is saying, if you're going to be having a meeting, if you want me to read something, send it to me 2 days in advance. That way I'll be able to read through it and we can talk about it in detail in the meeting, as opposed to you turning up with it and you getting my first impressions. Because I would rather think about something so I can give you a more well-rounded opinion instead of, yep, you need a comma. Okay. Also think about punctuality. If you've got a meeting that starts at 10 o'clock, I would recommend actually starting it at 5 past and making sure that the soft start is at 10, the real start is at 5 past 10, just to ensure that people can make sure that they are punctual. More often than not now, people are having meeting after meeting after meeting, lecture after lecture after lecture. Having these 5-minute breaks to make sure that your meetings are starting at 5 past and ending at 5 to the hour, it does really help in ensuring that people are actually able to turn up and be punctual. It's also this actually helps a lot with focus as well, and making sure that people can be focused inside of these meetings. Okay, it's also very difficult to ensure that the meetings that you're having are fair and that people are actually having their voices and their opinions heard. Another reason for having teams that are of a smaller size inside of Agile is so that we can ensure that this is a little bit more of something we want to care about. So we want to try and make sure that we are going around and asking everyone their opinions. We also want to make sure that our teams are distraction free and that we're able to kind of focus our full attention on the work that's happening, and that the technology that we're using is only the technology that we need for that team. Okay? If you are going to be using a new system for carrying out a meeting, make sure that you're well prepared in advance and you know how to carry out the work that you're going to be doing. However, despite our best efforts, there can be situations inside of teams where things can be a bit challenging. We can use something called a BART analysis in order to try and figure out how to resolve conflict inside of teams. We can look at the boundaries that are present and try and figure out, well, are people overstepping the mark with the roles that they've been assigned? We can have a look at the authority inside of a team and try and figure out, well, who is ultimately responsible for this? We can have a look at the roles inside of a team. Are there any informal roles that are appearing, and are these informal roles actually making things more challenging? And can we also look at the tasks? So are the tasks that people are carrying out, are these the correct tasks, or are they making up their own things as they go along? Finally, we can have a look at the communication inside of Agile teams. Because there's less of an emphasis on actual detailed documentation inside of Agile, there has to be more of an emphasis on communication and the complexity of that communication as well. We can think about communication in two different ways. We can think about it in terms of pull and push. Pull communication is really up to the receiver of something to determine when they need the information. So you opening up your emails and having a look at them. Push communication is really up to the person that's sending the information to be the one that says, you now need to receive this. So something on Messenger popping up on your phone as a push notification to say, this is something we now want you to pay attention to. And it's worth thinking, well, what things inside of a project need to be pulled and what things inside of a project need to be pushed. We can also think about communication in terms of whether it's asynchronous or synchronous, terms that we've become very, very familiar with over the last 9 months. Synchronous communication are things that are really happening in real time. A chat with someone on Messenger is probably going to be synchronous. Asynchronous communication is something where the two entities don't have to be present at the same point in time. So an email is very likely to be an asynchronous communication method. You're sending a message and then that message is then going to be relayed at a different point in time to someone else for when they're actually going to read it. There's a number of different things that we can think of inside of communication, and the model that we can use to look at these involves all of these things. I'm not going to go through all of these here, but instead I'm going to look at the diagram that we can use to explain them. We can think about communication as involving three different things. We've got the sender, the receiver, and then the medium that's used for that communication itself. Anytime that we are communicating, noise can appear. That noise can appear because of the message that's being sent, the medium that is being sent through, or the interpretation of that message by the person that's receiving it. Think about the way that you would say something in a Zoom call and how that changes to how it appears if it's in a Facebook Messenger or in an email. Okay? Normally, if I receive an email that's like, "Dear Dr. Crab," comma, I'm like, oh, this is serious. Whereas if I receive something that's like, "Hi, Mike," exclamation mark, smiley face, I'm like, okay, this is probably going to be a nice light email. These sorts of things change depending on the medium that is being used. So it's worth thinking about the sender, the medium, the receiver, and where the message is fitting into this, and how the different ways that you communicate are going to create challenges or different opportunities for the way that people will understand your message. The way that we communicate also depends on a large number of things, and there's a number of different kind of things that we can now use anytime that we are trying to communicate with others. We can split these into two different areas of interactive or non-interactive things. Inside of this, the black line is non-interactive, and the white line is interactive. And really we can see with this that the more interactive a communication method is, the higher the effectiveness and the richer that communication method is going to be. With this, we can see things like face-to-face meetings, video conferencing, and text chats are really going to have a rich communication style, where things like paper documents and Wikipedias are really going to have a low effectiveness and a low communication style. The last thing that I wanted to talk about in terms of communication was this idea of radical candor. With this, what we're really trying to do is to be able to show that we care personally about people in our projects. But we want to be able to show that we care enough to be able to challenge them, but with that level of personal care in place. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put up another video inside of the materials for this week that explains radical candor in a lot more detail, and it is something that I would recommend that you watch in order to try and understand this a bit more. Okay. That's it for the videos for this week. Again, we've got another set of videos that you can watch afterwards, a number of pages inside of the textbook that I'd like you to pay attention to too, and we've got a number of lab activities that you can take part in this afternoon.